We are live. I just sat here for a minute in complete silence because I was reveling in the fact that by myself, totally as an adult, I've taken us live to 2 different channels on Restream. I am so proud of myself. That's why we're early today, as I just assumed it was going to fuck up. And I did not know. I've got chat up from 2 different channels. I've got 2 channels streaming at the same time. I'm basically a wizard. I'm gonna basically cast Fireball next. That is what's happening right now.
Brad the Wizard, you heard it here first.
I mean, I am. I'm at least a 15th level wizard. Screw, I can't even be contained by Baldur's Gate 3. They've got a level 12 cap. So, we should talk about stuff. You want to talk about some things? And maybe even some stuff?
Yeah, so this is the first time we've been successfully getting the Deal With It to stream to both channels live. So if you're here, thank you. If you haven't seen a Deal With It before, this is where Brad and I take a no-nonsense, no complaining approach to the meta and just tell you straight how to deal with it, how not to be just down about the game, down about your faction. We're not dealing with any of that. We're not complaining about Eldar. We're just talking strictly how to deal with things and giving you like the real details of if you're going to win, this is how you're going to do it.
We are going to make this happen. You know what? We're probably jumping into our greatest challenge as of so far, according to the MetaWatch data. Because where's Tal there? Hold on.
Oh, we're hanging. We're hanging at the bottom.
I'm just saying. Let me check from the bottom down. It's Eldari, Gene Stealer. Oh, there they are, right above Votan. So this is happening, guys.
Oh yeah.
I thought we're finally having Brad's intervention.
Stay tuned for that.
Damn it, it's right afterwards. That's how they get me. So the thing is that I think a lot of this data is poopy. I think that people aren't trying. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a big dichotomy in a lot of the power levels of the list. But before everybody just starts throwing rocks at me, not even tomatoes, just straight to rock. They skip the tomatoes, straight to rocks. But I think that you have to come with a game plan to win. And we're going to talk about that. It's one of the biggest things. We're going to talk about setting a game plan, because you can't just use your old tactics against the new meta, the new 10th edition. We have to really, really, really figure out what's going on. So it's important to have a game plan, which is what we're going to try to do for you today. I'm excited about this, Sean. I really like this series quite a bit. So who are the top dogs right now? And this might be completely negated in 2 weeks, but we're just still going to put it on there. Hopefully. Eldar, GSC, Custodes, Imperial Knights, they're still staying at the top there. Thousand Suns is starting to make a peak. Every one of the top armies, and we've talked about this before, has consistent high damage output, and most of them have mobility, or they have a way to cheat mobility. And then all of them have above average resilience. So this is the GW data. That is true. So we have to look at their strengths. They have to look at our strengths, our weaknesses, and their weaknesses, because we're going to look at their weaknesses. One of the biggest things is when you're looking at an army, and I tell people to do this all the time, at least deploy the other army and look at it from their perspective, because then you can start to pick apart, what are they weak to? Are they GSC and Eldar? They fall apart a little bit if you can put a volume of shooting on them. If you put a volume of shooting of high AP, for instance, Custodes, they don't have that many models. They have weak secondary game, high point per investment, knights. So we're looking to pick apart what we can do to deal with it. What are we going to? And we're going to get a lot of things that overlap when we do the factions. But the biggest thing is that you consistently understand what your plan is to beat these top tier armies. So let's jump down. How do we deal with it, Sean? How do we deal
First,
with it?
we have the most important step. We have preparing. Now, preparing includes everything before the tournament. It includes all of your, your studying. I know everybody hates that word, but you got to know your rules. You got to know what your units do, and you got to actually take a look at where your, as Brad said, your strengths and weaknesses are as an army. Then we're going to, as we already mentioned, we're going to first identify our opponent's strengths and weaknesses, and then kind of, really evaluate where our strengths are.
Sorry, we have to go to one of the weaknesses. Apparently, one of the weaknesses is burst table flip. Mostly resin models won't survive the fall.
Very true. Very true. Resin. Oh man, resin will just break real easy. You try to get anything ordered and it's resin, I just know I'm gonna have to super glue it 1,000 times to put it back together. But that's part of that's part of 40K, and you do have to make a plan based on what units you want to take, and that is our next step. You do need to make a plan and decide how you're going to approach the strengths and weaknesses of both the opposing army and your army. And then finally, once you have that plan, you're going to practice it and make adjustments. Too often do people just say this is their plan, and then when it doesn't work, they go, well, the army's bad. In this case, if you played Tau once and your plan didn't work, you probably put them on the shelf and never touched them for the last 2 months.
100%.
We are here to say, don't do that. You don't have to do that. And as I told Brad before we started, I think Tau are a faction with one crippling problem, and the rest of the book is actually solid. And if we're going to that, as Brad and I mentioned, the data slate, potentially in 2 weeks, maybe you're going to shake some things up. And if it takes out that crippling weakness, I think Tau improves substantially.
And remember that this is a big circular thing. So preparation, and then underneath it, or actually preparation, then identify strengths and weaknesses, then make a plan, practice, and make adjustments is literally a circle. Because you should be constantly adjusting your plan. Practice it, make the adjustments, new plan, and continue on. You know what I mean? You're constantly evolving. You're constantly adapting. Don't be afraid to constantly be changing. Again, you want to have a core concept of your list, but then you want to be adapting all the time. Especially, we're going to get back into regular 40K, which is we have to adapt to a new codex every, month or two? You know what I mean? So we're going to have to constantly be updating what our plan is, because we're going to have something new all the time in the meta. So it's important that we continually, always adjust your plan, adjust that practice, and just continue going on that. And let's talk about the greater good. This is an old school picture, by the way.
Oh yeah, this is the great. This is the epitome of Tau. You got your commander standing over, leading the fight. I love it. I love that picture.
Good times. All right, kill us about preparation. Give me some combos.
All right. So the first thing we got to know is Tetras. Oh my gosh, you need some Tetras.
I was to say, if you don't have Tetras, you're probably missing the boat. Tetras are fantastic. They're not even just a combo; they are the bread and butter of this army. It makes it work.
Yes, and Brad and I often talk about on this series, you don't just have to take this one unit. In this case, how they designed the book and the rules, you do actually need Tetras to function as intended. Now, why did they make this one piece of resin so good compared to everything else? Don't know. Can't do anything about it. This is dealing with it, not how it should be. So in part of dealing with it for Tau is you got to get yourself some Tetras. Now, there are some awesome conversion guides out there for just taking a Piranha and, doing a little bit of green stuff, doing a little bit of clipping, and suddenly you have some Tetras. I definitely recommend checking anything out like that because you've got to take these. Why are they so good? Well, when they're observing, and this is a guided and observer pair, when they're observing, their guided unit gets full rerolls to hit, and they have the marker light keyword. So they're going to ignore cover.
Also, I don't know if you saw it, but Still Frosty converted his Tetras to have Kroot drivers, and they're convertible, tops off. Sun's out,
Oh
guns
yeah,
out.
yeah, definitely go check out Still Frosty Gaming. That's where Brandon and I do battle reports, and he gives great hobby advice. And I definitely would encourage you to look at all his awesome Tau conversions if you're looking for a hobby idea. Just fantastic army.
Kroot party.
So getting back into it, also at Tetras, they're OC2 apiece. They come in units of 2, and they're T7 with 7 wounds each. Very crucially, you only need 1 alive to still do guiding. So, T7, 7 wounds is no joke, and you can just run out onto points and see somebody and get your value, and then if it just lives on 1 wound, you got 1 model, 1 wound, it still does exactly what you want.
Everything that you wanted to do on that.
Every single thing you want.
And I think that this is the one thing. We might go into other things, but like Tetras are just a must-have for me. They power the army. There's never a time when I didn't want full rerolls, and that's just such a big deal.
That's exactly right. And, when we get into the list, we'll have the breakdown. But I think I talked about this with Still Frosty, that's Brandon exclusively. You want 2 units of 2. You don't have to go whole hog with 3 of them. 2 is plenty, because if 1 lives on 1 wound, it still does exactly what you want.
And you will be trying to peek these out. Remember, you're not trying to zoom out. I say this all the time. Figure out exactly what you want to see. Barely clip it. Make it so that as few models as possible can see you in return.
Exactly. Well, now that the Tetra show is over, we have some actual combos. Not just telling you this unit is awesome, take it. Shadowsun and Ghostkeel / broadsides. Okay, so what is this? Well, Tau have a particular playstyle you can do where you castle up. That means you get your powerful shooting units together, and Shadowsun's going to give them reroll 1s to hit, and Ghostkeels can't have lone operatives, so they can't be targeted unless you're inside of 12. What this lets you do is move this little ball around and shoot at your opponent without being shot back. Very powerful tool in 40k to just not be shot back. And that's why this little combo is in there, because if you're running it, that's what you intend to do with it. Then broadsides, for a similar reason, they do not have lone operative, but they're just so tough. They have 8 wounds apiece, and it is just really hard to push through that 2-up save with 8 wounds.
100% on that. And they do put out some decent damage on that, too.
They do. Broadsides actually have devastating wounds, and we're talking about this in context of the heavy rail rifles, which is the way I think you should run them now. They just put out an absurd amount of damage if you connect with them, and they're just very, very difficult to take down back. Okay. Then we have, this is what people are more comfortable with. This is the crisis builds. You can either do a Coldstar commander plus Exemplar of Kauyon, or you can do a crisis commander with precision of the hunter. The first one, you start getting your exploding 6s to hit on battle round 2. Now that's very important.
So big.
When you want to, for example, rapid ingress in, and then suddenly you have crisis that are with a Coldstar moving 18 inches and just appearing in front of your opponent's army with exploding 6s to hit and potentially full rerolls from that Tetra unit. This is a very powerful, and as we'll get into it, your main damage dealing source. Now, the Crisis Commander with Precision of the Patient Hunter, what that does is you hit on 2s with your Crisis Commander and you reroll once. Brandon and I like to give them missile pods.
Sorry. Oh, just because I'm just reading the wall and all I see is Grateful Dead Rhodey brings his nephew to work day.
Thank you. So you take your Crisis Commander and you give him Precision on Hunter. Now he hits on 2s, he rerolls 1s, and he actually gives the whole Crisis unit rerolls of 1. And the Missile Pod unit can sit really far in the back and just put out lots of consistent damage from the first turn on.
You know what I think? What about some Farsight in here?
There is Farsight, and I left it off so that you could... I specifically wanted you to talk about Farsight.
Fine. We should have Brandon come on, because he will talk about assaulting with him, like, exclusively.
True. Farsight is a very powerful unit. He gives his unit... He's going to attach to a crisis unit. He gives them +1 to wound, and once per game, he can reroll hits wounds against target in melee. I would not suggest running him into Shalaxi Hellbane, as Brandon find out. That's a bad plan. But into other things, other smaller things, he's actually, pretty solid.
And the thing is that I wouldn't look at the melee on it. But the big thing is +1 to wound is always going to be a big deal, especially when you're talking about having a ton of weapons that are going to wound bigger things on 5s. Bringing that back down to 4s is really upping that damage that you're going to be doing.
Yeah, and he definitely fits along with your rapid ingress in. You can kind of put him with your cyclic ion unit, or you can put him with, just a smaller unit that's going to run out and be a lot more annoying for your opponent when suddenly you've got a big crisis unit that's putting out a ton of shots of damage, and then you have this slightly smaller crisis unit, but it has Farsight. So now they're both a problem that you need to deal with on 2 separate areas of the board. Moving on, we have another popular combo. We have the Breacher Fish. For those of you who don't know, you can advance a Devilfish forward, drop out some Breachers who get full rerolls to wound when targeting something on an objective. And then if your opponent wants to charge the Breachers, you can pay CP, and they can just get back in the Devilfish. Now, I am personally not a fan of this combo because it is predicated on everything going right and you having both Breachers after the shooting phase and the Devilfish, which in my case is...
And CP.
And CP, which is hard to come by in this edition, especially with Tau being very hungry with their CP. And that leads us well into the next thing. This is a high amount of CP you need to spend to do this combo, but Pure Tide Ingram Neurochip lets you use a stratagem, maybe it's already been used, so that lets you double strike and fade on a turn, which is very powerful if you can get it off. But I have
thought about that quite a bit. The only thing is that they're no longer infantry, so you do have to set it up.
Correct.
Kind of shuffling behind walls as opposed to jumping through them like you used to. So it's a better setup, it's a harder setup, but it's still really, really able to be done. And I think people aren't utilizing it enough because everybody's just angry that you can no longer do that. You have to adapt. Yes, it is worse, but still very viable.
Yes, and if you want to try this combo out, I would try it by taking some lone ethereals and just leaving them in reserve. Ethereals have an ability where you just roll a die and on a 4-up you gain CP. That's pretty much what you need when you're going to be spending potentially 4 CP in a turn to double strike and fade.
I would say to double strike and fade.
Very powerful, very expensive. And the final thing, this is just something you should be doing on your Tau units. This is the Marker Drone and Gun Drone. What this little combo does is you just need to give one model in the unit, Marker Drone and Gun Dome. It lets you advance and be an observer. It also lets you advance and do actions, even when you otherwise wouldn't be, because the Gun Drone is assault. And now your unit has the assault keyword, which means you can just move wherever you want, do your actions.
And that's a big thing is because you're looking, as always, it's not just about killing. Sorry, Tau players. But it's sometimes about scoring and being able to do those actions, being able to put down a teleport homer, the second cleanse, get those points on the board.
That's exactly right. And we're going to spoil it in this next section a little bit. Tau has lots of cheap scoring units. We got the Kroot Riders. We got the Kroot Hounds. You've got Farsight Marksman, which is just a little 70-point lone op guy. You've got 55-point Piranhas with Seeker missiles that can infiltrate.
But the big thing about the Piranhas, especially, Piranhas are fantastic for not only scoring for move blocking because of the fact that they were born for move blocking, in the fact that they just have a tiny little body and then a big arms wide, don't go this way model. So they can take up a lot of space.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point, and that's kind of what you're in for when you're playing Tau. Is you need to get very comfortable taking these not necessarily very aggressive approaches, but very tactical approaches with some of your units.
So,
yeah, go ahead, Brad.
No, I just want to say the thing is that don't forget about these secondary trash units. It's very, very important. I mean, I am a little bit the trash man, but you still have to have those units out there. So because in the end you have to score points. You can't just go, hey, I'm going to kill everybody. Sometimes that works. Most of the time you need to still focus on scoring points. Don't sleep on these.
That's right. And we're going to touch briefly. Yes, you can hold objectives with Ghostkeel and Anva, but really with Tau, you're going to make a movement plan. This is an army that has to make a movement plan, and your units are basically going to be pulling double duty. They're always going to be holding the objective and shooting at something. They're always going to be denying a deep strike and barely touching an objective. And then what's the army identity? I touched on it. You can either play a castle type strategy. This is where you bunch up in a ball and keep your power locked and loaded, ready to go if your opponent steps out. Or you can play a more moving around the board, rapid ingressing in, aggressive crisis type build.
100%.
So event rulings, we had it touched on in the chat. I believe it was Kara Quintero. You have to know how Overwatch is going to work. If your tournament's going to say you can use it twice in the same phase, you do have that option if you go the Pure Tide Ingram Neurochip route. But more importantly, you need to know how For the Greater Good's going to work. I have seen tournaments rule it very differently on who can be an observer and who is guided and what that means and how it interacts with doing actions or doing other things. Definitely send a question to your TO. Just write an email. Hey, how does this work? Tower, not a very popular tournament army right now for reasons we'll get into, but you definitely need to know that. And secondly, as Brad mentioned earlier, your crisis suits cannot go through walls anymore. I had my highest placings in tournaments last edition with Tau, and in every single one of my games, I was running my crisis troops straight through walls, and they just can't do that. Just can't.
They are vehicles, so yes.
Yeah, so make sure you know if you're going to play a bunch of really tall ruins that are going to prevent knights from shooting you, your crisis are going to have to go all the way up, over, and down. And I would be very aware.
Love everything about it. Let's identify some strengths and weaknesses. What's the strength? Give me some. Actually, you know what? I'm doing the strengths.
You're doing the strengths? All right.
I'm always good cop. You're the bad cop. Unmatched single target offense. Greater Good plus Kauyon. Double explosions with full rerolls is bonkers town. There's times when you can shoot like just a ball. You have to show your opponent exactly what the Greater Good plus Kauyon does. It is a big deal on that. So you have just crazy amounts of damage you can throw out sometimes. They have great secondary play if you have loaded up your army with the appropriate units, because they have tons of cheap units and they have a really good amount of lone operatives, which lone operatives are fantastic. You need to be taking some. They still have a huge amount of mobility. The 18-inch crisis brick moving. You have Breacher Fish is just getting some serious distance out there. So they have some good mobility. They have to basically temper that again with the fact that they can't just go right through walls. But they have mobility, they have good secondary play, and they have good offense. Bad cop, British dad.
That's me.
What's the weaknesses here?
Okay, so I did mention it earlier. I think this is the crucial weakness of Tau right now, and it's that it is very difficult to engage multiple targets at once, which means they're very weak to your opponent just running some trash out and another big unit, and Tau now goes, uh-oh, I've got one big damage dealing unit, and because of For the Greater Good, if I just try to split fire, suddenly my attacks are worse. That's a huge deal.
Wildly worse, too.
Yeah, that's a huge deal, especially for a lot of people who played Tau last edition, myself included. My go-to plan was have perfect target priority, which we'll get into, and know exactly what shots I needed to allocate to which units. So I'd have one crisis unit just run up, pick 3 units, and I'd allocate my guns appropriately.
Well, also, you used to do that because you would have your Tau unit buffed with every buff, and then you would split appropriately and do Tau.
That's right. That's right. It is a combination of things. And whereas now it is very much focused on, hey, I've got to see you. And that's another big problem that Tau have, which is you got to see your opponent to get everything done. And there are some factions that you just can't see. We'll get into that in a minute. But another huge thing is their keywords. The good units have the wrong keywords. Most importantly, they're all vehicles. Now, you might say, hey, those crisis units, they can shoot into combat. They can shoot out of combat into things. And that's awesome. Except that everyone has anti-vehicle guns. And suddenly,
whoa.
all of your...
What do they also have? anti-fly guns.
Fly guns. Yes,
And
that's very
also, the problem is that the nerf to fly, if you're not infantry, is really strong. Fly became a detriment, basically, because I can already move through my own troops in the first place. I'm not making a bunch of assaults where I need to jump over people, so I really don't get the benefit. So that's why it's a detriment here.
Indeed. And there's also the fact that your best weapons have hazardous. This goes for the Ghostkeel and the Crisis suits. And as Still Frosteel account, sometimes you just roll a bunch of ones and you blow up half your unit. That's a big feels bad. And there's not really a good way for Tau to mitigate that other than just not choosing to overcharge, which you absolutely need to sometimes. So you're just taking, you're taking and you're literally rolling the dice with your unit to see if, yeah, hey, I destroyed your unit, but I also destroyed mine. And that's not good. Finally, they are very inflexible right now. Tau had a lot of the ability to do ridiculous and silly things with their mobility last edition. Now they're very much that inflexible, I am going to shoot you and move kind of army. We had a lot of good opportunities last edition to charge crisis suits in. I would not recommend doing that now.
Come on now, you can definitely make that work.
Oh yeah,
melee for days. You can do anything. Let's talk about the plan, because I'm a huge fan of the plan.
Okay. So first thing, this is another case, and I know we will get to some of the armies that mitigate weaknesses, but lean into your strengths as Tau. You are a fast, very powerful shooting army. You are going to want, with lots of lone operatives, you're going to want all of those things in your list. Conveniently, a lot of your units do that. We got so many lone operatives.
And the thing is also the strengths of this army are a volume of good, not great, good strength, good AP shots. That's the kind of the backbone of this, because if you go into just shooting just the big stuff, you're going to be sad about basically what happens.
That's exactly right. I'm going to leave off the first bullet there for the end, actually. So against Imperial Knights, we talked about Imperial Knights being a top dog. Historically, Tau have been pretty good into Knights, and I don't think that actually changes this edition. I think that the plan is definitely to focus fire down a big Knight with all of your rerolls, all of your explosions, and just take it off the board for GSC. I know this is something we're harping on a lot, and this is something that is being reflected in tournament results, is if you know to screen out GSC with infiltrating units and take control of the board, then when they have to drop and take out your trash units, you can either pick those GSC units up, or you can just run and touch them with, I don't know, a Ghostkeel. And they aren't ever getting away, while the Ghostkeel is just going to fall back and do its thing normally. Then we have actually a good talk from the WTC, which is a lot of I shouldn't say a lot. There were teams that brought Tau as a specific counter to Custodes. Why? Well, we hinted at it. If you just put a whole bunch of AP2 ignore cover shots into Custodes, they have a real problem with that.
Yeah, they still are taking their 4-ups at that point in time, and, well, they make half of them. So you lose a lot of guys on that, especially they can do them from a distance, especially when you're talking fire and fade, possibly a double fire and fade at that point in time. Get yourself out of that charge distance for Custodes. Custodes are doing most of their damage in hand-to-hand. So back it up, and it works.
It does, and that is something that was practiced very heavily. So, this is where I don't think the win rate of Tau is very indicative of where they can be with some minor adjustments. Now, obviously, that splitting fire thing is a big deal. Also, keywords are definitely going to hold them back from some of the top armies who will always have some anti-fly or anti-vehicle nonsense going on. And that's kind of where we get into, what are the key units? You'll notice a lot of them are lone operative, a lot of vehicles. Sorry, Brad, go ahead.
No, it's just, the thing is one of the things is we're going to have to talk, and we're going to talk about this in the practice and adjustments, because I think one of the big things with Tau is, and we'll get into this again with practice and adjustments more than just this, but going into your make a plan, you have to start worrying about what are the distances that I'm working at. And those distances also are going to change depending on what you're playing against, because some armies you don't get punished as much for getting close to. You more want to just cut off angles. So Eldar, for instance, besides Yin Karn, I don't really care how close they are to me. I just want to not be shot by them. So I can get really, really close and cut off angles. If I'm playing Custodes, I need to have as much distance as humanly possible between them and I. You know, against Knights, it's a weird on that, because they have part of the army is going to have decent hand-to-hand, parts not, so you're going to have to start hitting flanks. But you're going to have to really figure out, what distance am I planning on being in? What's my sweet zone here to kill things? What is my sweet zone to score? How long before I'm going to play this game? Because one of the things we're going to get into at Tau is, I don't want to play a 5-turn game. I want to play a 3-turn game. And I'm not going to do that by going to the bathroom and never coming back. I'm going to do that by stalling out the game. I'm going to be that by using my trash units originally to touch, to score. But I'm not going to get into sustained firefights early, because I want to do it in a very truncated manner. I want to make it so that over the course of the game, the armies that have the most efficient point per attack are going to deal with us when you're playing your Tau. You have to make it so that you're in a limited amount of firefights and really maximizing your, preferably, we hit something, we kill all of it, we fire and fade, and we take no fire back. But like, that's not always going to be the case, so that's why I want to limit the game down.
Right, and Mr. Crawley in chat has pointed out Eldar with an asterisk. I'll approach it now. I do feel like the worst possible matchup for Tau is also the most popular army in a tournament right now. They have so many tools to make sure they aren't seen, that suddenly all of your unique abilities and combos start to not function when you can't see your opponent. And they very much nerf Tau's indirect ability, which is a weakness of Eldar right now. Not so much that you can't run one crisis suit out or rapid ingress it in and get an angle on some Eldar units. It's more that a Night Spinner shoots you and suddenly your crisis brick doesn't move as far, which means maybe you can only see one unit. But most importantly, they just make it so that only one Tau unit can see. Yeah. And then,
well, it's big, because I think that you're going to work a lot on reserves. I think you're going to hit, and the thing is to be honest, it's still a bad match. There's a reason why they're winning at a ludicrous rate. But I think when you're playing against Eldar, it's important, very important, to hit a flank very, very hard and not try to dance around with them. They're faster than you. They have more ability with their fire and fade of full movement. Their Phantasm, you have to hit one flank super, super hard and make it so that they get punished for trying to hit you with what they're going to hit you back. So you want to take away a few pieces, but the thing is you're going to use reserves, you're going to use deep strikes, you're going to use the ability to hit somewhere super hard, because you do have good movement. You're going to be able to hit some things. They have a huge footprint. They still, even though they're hiding very well, they still have a big old butt. There's a lot of big old grav tanks back there that you can get line of sight on, and I really believe that you can do that. It's not easy at all. So it depends on what your exact list is on that, Crawley, because you're like maxing your reserve. It's going to depend on the mission and their exact list too. How much trash do they have? Are we, because if they have a ton of spiders, for instance, if they have different things, if they have a lot of garbage, they can push everything forward and keep me away. Now you're going to have to kill yourself a space to go also, because you know that they're going to fire and fade, they're going to Phantasm back. You have to murder all of the trash so that you can give yourself a place for those reserves to come in. It's important that you're not just hoping for the best in where your opponent's going to give you. Now you need to kill yourself an area to go into.
That's a big deal. That's actually something we talked about a lot with GSC as well during our ATC prep, is knowing how to make space for yourself on the board for later turns. It's almost more important to make that space than to keep a unit alive, because it drastically changes how the game's actually going to be played. And as Brad said, you're going to be doing a lot of that against Eldar. don't want to harp on just one matchup for too long, because obviously there is a lot of Eldar, and we want to make this guide for later as well. So if you're watching this in the future and Eldar has received some massive nerfs,
well, it still applies though. That still applies.
Right, and this is a more
general,
not talking about how good Eldar is, and more talking about this is the plan against them. This is why we can't give full detail on it, because we don't know how they're going to change.
Right.
If they.
Sorry, it's just one of the things is it doesn't. You can replace Eldar with whatever the fast-moving army is.
Yes, that is true. If Grey Knights suddenly skyrocket to the top, or even demons, which I think is not unlikely, then it's going to be the same way. You need to make the space to be able to play. Moving into that, I did want to hit the practice slide while we're talking about that, because that is part of it. You're definitely going to have to practice making that space.
And I can't say enough, when you're practicing, you have to communicate with your practice partner. You have to talk about could have, would have, should have. So just immediately be willing to reset. Immediately be willing to look at, was that the best option? Talk through it. Literally go, hey, this didn't work. What could have worked? What would have just been better? What would have been a little bit better? Let's talk through the potential of each one. Go, I could have done this and gone very aggressive. I could have hit this flank, or I could have waited till a little bit longer. What do you think? You know what I mean? Don't be afraid to just look for, hey, let's try it. Let's see. Talk it through. Ask, well, what would be harder for you? If you're trying to play that out there that night, that GSC, you make a move and you have an option of, an aggressive move, a push move, defensive move. Ask your opponent, what would be the most basically annoying move I could do? What would make it more difficult for you to close this game out? That's what you want to get into, is just talk to your opponents and get what they would have the most problems dealing with. Figure that out.
That's exactly right. And this is something that Brad and I harp on every time in a Deal With It video, is that the more you communicate with whoever you're practicing with, the better you will be at explaining your intent during a tournament game. The more often you say, hey, I'm trying to do this. How can I do that? Does this work? Does this work? That's something that you will just have down pat. You'll just do it accidentally. I mean, I do it most of the time when I'm playing my tournament games, even if it's just at an RTT, especially with a reserve-heavy army, which how potentially can be. You want to be able to look at where your units can set up on the board and say, I'm trying to set my unit up here so it can do this thing, and then go here on the following turn. Is that possible to do over here? And that's one of the first things you need to start figuring out is, how do you get comfortable saying, hey, this is what I'm trying to do? And while you're practicing making that space, you're practicing good communication, you're just going to start doing that.
Charlie's got a good point that, do these every time, not just your practice, but also ask in tournaments and stuff. Yeah. You can learn a lot from your tournament games also. So you should be learning all the time, to be perfectly honest with you.
You're right. That is a good point. Thank you, Mr. Crawley. We do often overlook that when we get to the practice slide. Is tournament games can be practice opportunities. RTTs, as I mentioned, great opportunity to get in a more competitive setting, and also just get comfortable doing that in that tournament setting with the clock running.
So I cannot stress enough, once you practice, make adjustments. Make small adjustments, and adjustments aren't just in the list. A lot of times you have to ask yourself, do I need changes in the list? Do I need changes in my play, or do I need changes in both? And most of the time it's a little bit of both. You're trying to optimize your play with the most optimum units that you can put in, but they're also the most optimal units for you, which means that, hey, Poland took Tau, I'll just grab their list. Well, maybe their list isn't exactly how you want to play. Change it out a few 100 points. You know what I mean? Maybe that's the core concept is what you want to do, but you want to have some different things in there. You want to have more trash, less trash, more hitting. You know what I mean? So figure out what you want to play with that. Do you want to play the aggressive Farsight? Do you want to play defensive like a Shadowsun Castle? So it's important to know, one, what you're comfortable with, that which play style makes you more comfortable, for one. Two, start making those adjustments of what can I do to be a little bit better? Is it just play? Did I not utilize my units as well? Or maybe I needed to cut a little bit of the fat off and I need to make this a little leaner. You don't want to cut too much because then you don't have as much to score the game and stuff like that. Do you want to go way more in and trash? I don't know. Maybe you want to play Brad's Oraclist that only has trash. But, and the thing is that, then you go, I'm going to go with the struggling. Struggling is Tal. Go into it, Sean.
All right, so the first one is one that I struggled with a lot when I first started playing Tau, which is all Baby knows is the corner. You put Baby in the corner and he likes it. He just kind of sits there. That is something that you need to get comfortable with, is with Tau, you will lose units. It will happen. You need to be able to make that space, as we talked about in the making a plan in practice. You need to accept that, yeah, you're not going to be left with all your crisis left at the end of the game most of the time. And you need to be comfortable moving and doing what they're supposed to do and making your opponent respond to them. On that same vein, we have the Tom Ogden special. I went hard, I went fast, and I did way too little. I want to tell you that you can just jam 18 crisis suits and just run straight at your opponent off the line and it's going to work out. You know, Tom might try that, but Tower not really built for that for this edition.
I love the end of that. Sorry, baby boy.
I knew Tom was going to see this, and I just had to throw that on there. You know, you want to table them. I respect it. Tom and I play actually very similarly when we play high mobility armies, and oh man, I just not being able to run a crisis suit up and pick up 3 units is really killing my mellow. You know? The
thing is that you're going to have to hit those flanks very, very hard. And this is what you're going to have to do with a lot of armies that aren't at the top. You know, you don't have the most efficient firepower. That means that you need to take on a portion of their army. And you only want a portion of their army shooting back at you, which is why it's such a big deal that you isolate and delete things. Isolate, delete, score. Isolate, delete, score.
That's exactly right. And part of that is the final one, which is, but I have all these guns. I don't charge. I'm Tau. Now, while charging for damage is not something you should do, charging just because you're going to get good position or potentially wrap up a unit or score a secondary is absolutely a good
and
point.
Also, sometimes you can charge, grab a unit, and be behind cover somewhere, as opposed to standing there. All of a sudden, you're behind that building, especially when you're looking at the GW layout options. Sometimes you're on any of those really, but you know, table 1, table 3, where you can just hit the bottom there, make a charge and get behind that building, you cut down the fire coming back at you by 50% or more. It's big.
That's exactly right. And you oftentimes can just shoot anyway once you're tagged up with something. That was a huge benefit we got last edition, and that is still true now. You just continue to shoot them. Your vehicles. You're going to take that negative most of the time, and it's a positive here.
100% on that. Let's talk about the deal with the preparation. I mean, it's very, very big. We know our army scores. We know our combos. We found out ahead of time how our tournament is going to rule for the greater good. Oh, I love it. We are going to try flag our crisis suits through walls. I needed to read that one for you just to go, well, maybe Sean did that. So yeah. It's a big thing on this, is that when you're looking at preparation, you have to put everything together. So the preparation basically includes everything underneath it. So that's the overlying preparation, includes everything. Being comfortable, bringing your stuff, you know, also with preparation, bring cards you make yourself. Bring whatever aids you need to help you, to make you the fastest you can be, and to also, and this goes with every army, but I cannot state enough how good it is to have everything that you need resource-wise right in front of you, because the more time you burn doing dumb shit, like not knowing where your general deployment is, not knowing what your stats on your unit is, not knowing how something works, read that up first. Give yourself the most time you can have. Nobody wants to lose a game because you felt rushed on turn 5. You know what I mean? That's a big deal.
That is, and something I would advise for this edition specifically is just get 2 different colored poker chips. You got a observer poker chip and you got a guided poker chip. It's the easiest thing to do, just to place them down and keep yourself straight, keep your opponent straight on what's firing, and it'll really improve your target priority once you start doing that and actually seeing it on the board.
So let's talk about identifying strengths and weaknesses. Hit us up there.
So we talked about this. Tal's big strengths. You've got mobility, you've got overwhelming single target damage, and you have great secondary scoring. Since you have all these lone operative units and you have these cheap units, you can be where you need to be without too much retaliation from your opponent. We are going to be aware, as Still Frosty mentioned in the chat, we're going to be mindful of our hazardous weapons. When to hazardous? When can I afford to lose my entire unit to rolling a bunch of 1s on my hazardous checks? We're also going to ask our opponents, hey, what anti-vehicle, anti-fly weapons do you have, so that we can not just lose an entire crisis unit to 1 activation from our opponent, at least as best as we can.
And it's big on that, because you have to lean into your strengths, especially when you have an army that isn't as versatile as you might want as some of the other ones that are at the top of the meta right now. So it's a big deal. I don't even know what that is, but there's a lot of them.
Oh yeah, we have some purple monkeys in the chat. Thank you.
I love everything about that. I don't know what the hell they are. But
thank you. That's wonderful.
One of the big things is that when you're looking at identifying your strength and weaknesses, playing into your strengths, trying to minimize your weaknesses, is making your plan. And I cannot stress again, and I say this to everybody that coach, you have your plan, and everybody's usually on top of it, and then you have your mid-game plan, because you have to go back and reevaluate your plan. Bottom of 2, top of 3, you should basically look at the table before you do anything. Look back at that plan. How am I scoring? Because every army does not want to be reactive 40k, which is just killing the shit that's right in front of me. Tau can get super bogged down with not being out of position, just killing the stuff that's near them. Sometimes you have enough speed to just go away. Move 18. Kill the thing behind the other wall. Leave the unit that moves 6 in the dust and just go. You don't want to get into that, I'm killing the stuff that's near me. Score points, kill the things that you're supposed to. And that goes into, what is my plan? How am I planning to win this game? How am I planning on scoring my points? Everybody can get bogged down. Most games, to be honest with you, get bogged down into killing shit that's really close to me. It's very, very big.
That's true, and that's part of being in the corner. If you spend the whole game in the corner just shooting whatever your opponent sends right in front of you, you're going to look up at turn 4, and they may not have an army, but you have never left the corner. So
you have no points. Yeah, exactly. It's just such a big, big deal. And the plan is you got good things on this. It's like, for instance, GSC, we need to pressure them to keep those ambush tokens back. Knights, I cannot stress again, almost every army a little bit, but especially Knights, kill small bits. Kill that one flank. Kill a big guy, kill a little guy, kill a couple little guys. Make it so something can't see you. It's just play a little bit at a time with Tau. If you go all in, you're going to find out that your shit costs more than other people's shit, and you will not be happy with the results. You'll be very happy with the results if you isolate and focus fire people down and keep that proper distance on them. And you'll be doing that with practice, because practice gives you I said at the earlier the video, which is, what distances do I want to be at for this army and against this army? Where do I need to be? Lone operatives, for instance. Is that lone operative doing anything, or is that lone operative just hanging behind a wall, making it so no one can shoot him, so the indirect's not shooting him? So even if somebody advances, moves up, tries to get right up on top of you, just make it so you're taking the objective. I would much rather have 5 more points every turn for primary than a couple shots from my lone operator. Score your points. Make your plan to win.
That is, and that leads us into practice. Pre-plan what your lone operatives are going to do. Know ahead of time that we talk about. It's okay to move out and strike something. It's okay to run a lone operative out and lose it. You're comfortable losing your units as long as they're doing something. Talk with your opponents. Communication is key in every 40K game you play, and with Tau it's no different. And finally, Brad's favorite part, we're making adjustments. You've got to be comfortable and familiar with your list. I think it was mentioned in chat earlier. Tau does not have one list. Now we have two variations coming up of a similar list, but that does not mean you must play them. You need to be comfortable and familiar with whatever you're bringing and that it fits your style. Do you like playing 9th edition Tom Ogden offense? Okay, well you're going to play a more aggressive list. But you don't have to only do that every turn starting from turn 1. But at the same time, you're not babying the corner. You're not just sitting back there.
Choose your time. Passive aggressive is what I call it. Come up, limit the amount of shots, kill things. Oh, I cannot stress this enough. Isolate, kill, take as few shots as possible. I want to play a shorter game. I don't want 5 turns of engagement. I want 2 or 3 turns of engagement and 2 turns of just screwing around, maybe killing one thing, no one shoots back at me. I would love to have as many resources as humanly possible alive at the end of the game. It feels really good when your whole army's in Kauyon and then you put the volume of fire on them. I want to stall. So we need those units that can do that. Practice that. Practice scoring. Practice making sure that one of the biggest things in 10th edition 40K, don't put up zeros on turn 1. You have to have things deployed. You have to have things that are fast enough to score some secondaries right away. We're going to get a Nova question. I said this off topic, but I haven't got a response yet, so I wanted to ask, is the DOG team for Nova still looking for another player or not? Because I asked Crawl and he hasn't got back to me. I don't know. I was one of the players on the DOG team, but I am not on the DOG team now because of life. And I'm driving with Tom literally during the tournament. So I will send you a message on that. So we got a couple lists here. I want to talk about, first off, we have a powerful list, a manly list. This one drinks vodka for breakfast. This one is power, and I call it Farsight Aggro. You know why? Because it's got Farsight, it's got aggro. Duh. So, first off, we start with, wow, look at Farsight. Farsight giving +1, he's a crisis commander. He throws down the pain. He can also beat people up. Not as many as you think, but still he can beat some people up.
Don't be charging greater demons.
Yeah,
Don't
exactly.
do it.
Coldstar with the Exemplar of Kauyon, 4 Cyclics. You're going to see a lot of the 4 Cyclics around here. Marker, Shield Drone. We've got a crisis with 4 missile pods, precision, marker, and a gun. We got a 6-man, a 3-man, and a 3-man. And all of these are going to be jammed up with Cyclics. Sans the last crisis unit, which I actually think is my favorite crisis unit. You're doing your big damage with these Cyclic units. You're putting the buffs on them. You're getting characters with them. You're slamming down and you're crushing some stuff. Of course, always flank, isolate. The other crisis unit has those long distance missile pods, and they are trying to pick up the trash. They're trying to nickel and dime people, trying to be safe. Those are the things you're doing stuff with early in the game where you're barely just peeking out. And then your other guys that are doing damage without sacrificing anything, Ghostkeels, lone operatives. With the Rakers, fusion, and support system on them, it's really nice. They're not going to flip the world over with their damage, but it's also nice to shoot something and then just give the finger to your opponent and tell them that you're not allowed to get shot back. It's very, very big.
And I wanted to step in there to say also, don't be afraid to charge your Ghostkeels. Ghostkeels have a silly rule that says twice per game when an attack is allocated to them, change the damage to zero.
Yeah. And that's a big thing on that. So we've got the Piranhas here. Piranhas, literally, if they do any damage, it's fantastic. They do have secret missiles and fusion, which is big damage weapons. But I want Piranhas to get in the way. I literally want them to stall the game. I want them to do an action. I want them to take an objective. I want them to get in the way. If they do anything else, cool. Same thing with the stealth suits. Fantastic unit. If they do absolutely anything, I will again be fantastically happy. But I want them for early game move blocking. I want them for early game mission taking and getting me that 5 points. That's what the stealth team's there for. And then we really have already talked a lot about the Tetras. Just use them. They're amazing. Full rerolls will power this army through. Full rerolls to hit and +1 to wound. It's a hell of a drug. Feels good.
For sure.
So we'll talk about this lesser list. I mean, the other list.
Yeah, the other list that I get to talk about, the lesser beings. Well, we trade off Farsight. We get
Shadowsun is a lie. Anva's dead. Come on.
I mean, he may be just a hologram, but it is what it is. So Shadowsun Castle. This list is more your style if you want to control the pace of the game and then hit really hard when it matters. To that end, we still have our Coldstar with Exemplar, Kauyon, and the 4 Cyclics. We still have a Coldstar now with 4 missiles, and the reason for this is we are not going to have as many units starting in reserve and just popping all over the table. Instead, we're going to have a much higher impact from turn 1 on, because if the opponent knows that we're going to be sitting back in the corner for a little while, then they might try to rush us and keep us down. So we need to keep a lot of missile shots, which is just a lot of volume at distance to put into them. Then, of course, we have your standard, your 6-man crisis unit with Cyclics. This is your damage dealing unit. It's your main damage dealing unit that's probably going to be starting in reserve and strategic rapid ingressing in, or coming off a homing beacon from a stealth suit. Then we have our trash, because you can't leave home without your trash and Tau. You can't leave home without your move blocks. We've got our Kroot Hounds and our Piranhas. Again, as Brad said, we're not really looking to deal damage with them. If they deal damage, awesome. If they don't deal damage, who cares? They're just there to get in the way. And then same setup. We have some 1 unit of stealth battle suits. They're there to give us some rerolls of 1 to wound, and we've got 2 units of Tetras. We talked all about them.
And the thing is that some of these things are just literally going to be in pretty much every list. So I think that you're probably always going to have a Piranha or 2. I think that the stealth team probably always makes it, and the Tetras are always making it for sure. I don't know if I have a list without the crisis right now, to be honest with you. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, as we just got a super chat that points out, Michael Irvin wants us to know that there is not enough Talnar on these lists, and he's highly disappointed. Now, this is a good example of something that you can bring that is very powerful, and if you don't want to bring crisis, you absolutely should slam that Talnar on the table. The Talnar has the advantage of, 1, being towering, 2, having a 2-up save and an invuln, and 3, having more guns than anyone. You can definitely look at one thing and just tell it doesn't exist anymore. Very powerful unit to bring, and that is where I would keep the core of the list the same and just take out some crisis for a massive Talnar. Because who doesn't love the Talnar? The Talnar is awesome. You were definitely right, Michael.
And well, the thing is I do want to talk about this real quick, because we talked about 2 sample lists that I really do feel are, for me, the best, but it's also the way I play. So let's talk about the big guys real quick. Now, we've already had some success in the WTC. We also saw an ATC where the Tau list had some success on stuff. You know what I mean? So, I love it. Michael Irvin showing up back to back. 1, 2 Taunars. Well, I want to go there. I'm going to go there with it. I'm going to, because of the shoot. You know what? The Playmaker is throwing down the super chats, so I am going to go full on into this. Especially if we get some nerfs to the tops. What are your thoughts on Tau big monsters, specifically Taunars, of course, but also Storm Surge love?
Yeah, so I actually thought
Storm Surge and Taunar with Shadowsun. Shadowsun has just an aura, 6 inches of this, which is really big, and Storm Surges can buff themselves, or they can buff each other, basically. So that's a big deal. And the Taunar has, because the guns on it are just whatever. You might time out shooting everything on that thing.
That's true. You definitely want to pre-count some dice if you're rolling a Taunar into things, especially if you're bringing 2 Taunars and you're bringing them in. I think it has real play. Until the most recent points nerf, the Taunar was definitely in my list. I was like, oh yeah, this thing is going to get it done. The Crisis only made the cut because they're just that little bit of points cheaper where they get to make it in there. So yeah, I definitely think that's a valid strategy. Same thing that somebody in the chat mentioned. Vehicles like the Skyray, reasonable vehicle. A little bit of points drops on it. Definitely something to watch out for, because it's going to start putting out 3 rocket shots a turn with real strength, AP, and damage.
Those are also not one-shotters anymore.
Correct. So every turn you're going to be laying down the beats with potentially full rerolls to hit and exploiting 6s from a Tetra. And turns out strength 14, AP 3, D6 plus 1 damage, pretty good when you get double exploding 6s on it.
I was just going to say, double exploding 6s is still the truth. That will put out some serious stuff. Also, let's be honest. To be fair, the Storm Surge and the Taunar's both main gun will kill pretty much any big thing. It is nuts. So, what's the flat damage on that? I gotta look it up again.
It's like 12 or something silly on the Storm Surge.
Yeah, so that is a real thing on that. Is it dealable with a lot of the armies that we have right now? Yes. Is it something that can be played? 100% yes. And I think that that's something that you can look into with that. You just still have to take enough trash with it. If you're taking 2 Taunars, like, the rest of your army is basically Kroot Hounds and Piranhas. There you go. So you need to still be able to score. So if you'd like to try the big guy version of this list, 100% go for it. Again, as always, don't let anybody tell you what not to bring. You know what I mean? Try everything on the table and throw it out there for sure.
And that's a good point. Is Taunar you're bringing because you want to bring the pain, and the Crisis units were bringing pain. If you're like, nah, I don't like that Crisis have a ton of weakness, slap him down. I mean, you've got Towering, a very silly keyword as we've seen, and it's also very tough. Just being able to get cover from having just a little bit of it behind a wall. I mean, that's fantastic.
I mean, it's bonkers down on that. I mean, it's a big deal to be looking at this. Does this look give up max, bring it down super easy? Yes.
Yes.
100%. The problem is that I don't know if I'm going to put a Tau army on the board that doesn't.
Correct. I think that's very, very true. You also might say, okay, they're just going to bring it down and assassinate. You get the option to play around that a little bit.
That's also a big deal, to be honest with you. So, because if I only give up one real secondary and my opponent takes bring it down and assassinate, and I can just play around assassinate, I actually think I can score more than they can at that. Because, like, I'm going to take tactical, and then I'm just going to score 35 plus, and they're going to score 20 plus whatever I give them on assassinate.
Yeah, and you also have this is something that came up in Brandon and I's game on our battle report. We did demons versus Tau, and even when Brandon, he chose the bring it down and assassinate right against me, and he went back through the cards as we get the benefit of watching the game afterwards. And if he had drawn tactical, he actually would have scored more points, even when I had 5 greater demons, and he killed almost all of them.
It forces you into a certain style of play, though.
Exactly. And for the first 2 or 3 turns, I kept him at 0 on secondaries because he made that decision. So there is a very real scenario where playing Tau, your opponent goes, awesome, I'll just take fixed. And, you just play very cagey. And suddenly you win by a few points because, well, all they're doing is running at you. And when all Tau has to worry about is kill what's in front of me, hey, that's fantastic. They can do that. So definitely don't get suckered into that trap. I do think tactical most of the time is a better play, even into armies that give up really huge amounts to bring it down or assassinate. For example, Tyranids, the all monster spam. They're going to be running at you so fast that it's hard to take something else. They don't usually play a lot of characters. So, you're looking at, cool, I'm going to get max points on Bring It Down. And then what else do I take?
Yep.
Storm Hostile Objective? Cleanse? How are you taking control of this objective and not dying to all these massive monsters running around? And that's something that, we may have to see changed in, a further new set of cards, or
Down
maybe
with
another
fixed.
balanced data slate.
Down with fixed. Down
Yeah.
with fixed.
They may have to buff fixed a little bit to make it.
No,
Like,
they need a
worthwhile.
nerf fix to make it so no one takes it.
Brad doesn't ever want it. I will say I do enjoy the game more when I'm playing tactical.
It's so much more fun.
It just is. But they did mention that, I know, in their one of the last interviews, is that fixed is a little bit weaker.
Good. I hope it's anemic. That's true.
Brad playing the Trash Master. I'm shocked the Trash Master wants to play the set of rules that emphasizes more trash.
100%. Take all the trash. You will never be disappointed.
Sure.
I'll be in Nova this weekend. So I'm rocking.
You're going to be playing the Orcs.
Wah!
That's right. I like it. I like the WA. It's going to be a blast to play that army.
Uh-oh. Let's see. We're going to judge this.
Uh-oh.
So Danny got 3 Riptides in their drones, 3 Broadsides and drones, 9 Crisis Suits and drones, 2 Coldstars and drones, 3 Hammerheads and like 20 Kroot for 350. Was that good? Yeah, that's like, did you rob his car? Like, what?
Legally. I'm going to assume these are obtained legally. And if so, fantastic job.
Yeah, like, this is only not a good thing as if you punched him in the face and threw a couple $100 in his car and ran away. Yeah, that's pretty good, man. The Riptides themselves cost that much, so
Yeah.
So,
First model I ever bought, Riptide. Bought it straight from the GW store. And I went, I don't know if I can keep playing this hobby, and I've only bought 1 model. That's how expensive those things are.
yeah, it's that was a good deal. I don't know if you're trolling me on that one. I like Hunter goes, it's more fun unless you draw secondaries like a donkey.
What should I get to add to the collection? Let's see what's in there. The characters. Definitely looks like you want,
He needs
some action.
He needs hounds. He needs some hounds and some Ghostkeels is what I would try.
Kroot carnivores, yes. I definitely pick up some Kroot Hounds. They are very cheap and do basically everything that you want to do.
Yeah, you need Tetras, Piranhas, and hounds. There you go.
Yes.
That's Aaron.
Yes, and I was just getting to the Tetras now that I saw 3 hand. Yeah, definitely have some Tetras. We harped on that during the video pretty heavily. Very difficult to play Tau as intended without some Tetras.
No big deal in that. Probably not going to get the random number that it just called me. But, and on that note, you ready for the Queen's Wave?
Oh, yeah, I'm ready.
Let's do this. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
We appreciate you.